Well, this week we are in the 4th week of our sermon series titled Guardrails, where we discover God's commands are guardrails meant to protect. They are boundaries meant to establish beauty, and they are fences meant to promote freedom. These come not from a heart of legalism, but from the loving heart of our Heavenly Father. Week 1, we looked at why God said we should have no other gods before him. In week 2, we discussed how we should avoid creating and worshiping any idols, as well as the generational consequences of idol worship and sin. Last week, Mark looked at why we should not misuse the name of the Lord our God, both in our words and in our lives. And today, we are going to explore the very controversial guardrail of Sabbath. I was delighted when Mark gave this to me. So what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the word Sabbath? For some of us, it's this picture. Yeah, you laugh, but you know what I'm talking about. Some of us grew up in something like that, and frankly, it looks miserable. I wouldn't want to inflict my kids upon that, or that upon my children. But for some of us, this is what we were brought up in, and this is what our picture is when we think about the Sabbath. In our culture, practicing, let alone valuing the Sabbath, is a foreign concept. Some of us have heard about the Sabbath, but we have very little experience with it, and we have questions. Does the Sabbath still apply today? Do everyday people, those people in my neighborhood and in my season of life, do they practice the Sabbath? Or is it just for the super Christians who are living in some monastery somewhere? And this is an honest question, somebody has asked me this. Asking for a friend, on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious is the Sabbath? Is it one of those commandments like don't steal? Or is it more of an optional guardrail? These are the questions that we're going to explore today. And Tish Harrison Warren, in her book, Liturgy of the Ordinary, said this, and I want you to take a look at this. A few years ago, a Sprint commercial proclaimed defiantly, I have the right to be unlimited. This is the message we receive from our culture. No limits. Nothing should stop you, hold you back, or limit your freedom. You can be unlimited, and if you're not, someone's to blame. We believe that we need better technology, better efficiency, and better organization so that we can exist as a people unbridled from creaturely limits. We value the right to be unlimited, regardless, and hear me now, regardless of the harm that it does our souls, our families, our schedules, our relationships. In this series, we've been discussing the guardrails that God has given to help us flourish. However, we are all thinking, surely, with Jesus' resurrection, this is one of those commandments that is optional. A nice luxury for those whose schedules aren't as accomplished and busy as ours. It's a good idea for when we've mastered all the more important commandments, right? Well, today we're going to explore what the Sabbath commandment is all about and if it even applies to us today. So let's explore this. What is the Sabbath all about? Well, over the last few weeks, we've unpacked the first 3 commandments. Number 1, don't have any other gods but me. Number 2, don't create or worship any idols. And number 3, don't misuse God's name. Now, if you remember, Mark talked about the 3 categories of law: civil, ceremonial, and moral. Now, we don't follow the civil and ceremonial laws anymore, but we do follow the moral laws. And if you're looking at me now with confusion, I would encourage you to go back and listen to week 1, where Mark unpacks that whole concept. Unlike what we might have been taught growing up, this whole series is about the fact that God didn't create these commandments as an impossible task, ready to rain down punishment when we mess up. He created these commandments as guardrails from a loving parent to help us grow in wisdom, flourish, and navigate life well. So for those of you who grew up with an image of a punitive father, a punitive God, this is going to be a push, right? Because some of us, when we were taught the 10 Commandments growing up, it was a list of to-dos, things that we had to make sure that we were measuring up against. But God tells us something different. I want you to notice that the first 3 commandments focus solely on God, and the 4th commandment is about us. Take a look at this. In Exodus chapter 20, it says this: "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you will not do any work, neither you nor your son nor daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Now this commandment stands out as the only law concerning worship and ceremony in the 10 Commandments. And the Sabbath specifically is derived from the Hebrew verb, and I want you to pay attention to this, rest or cease from work. So the very name is telling us to rest or cease from work. The Hebrews were to set aside each 7th day as belonging to the Lord their God. Now we see a direct parallel between this commandment and God's actions at creation. He models for us working for 6 days and resting on the 7th. Now, do you think the God of the universe needed to rest? I mean, seriously, of course not. If it were me, I would have taken the 7th day and I would have created another planet or a new species. But God didn't get my memo, okay? And he chose instead to model for his kids living in a sustainable rhythm of rest at creation. What we need to understand is that the term holy also signifies being dedicated to the Lord. So by observing the Sabbath, we're not just following an example set by God. We're offering him the beautiful gift of our worship. So in Exodus 31, in the Message translation, we see God speaking to Moses. "Tell the Israelites, above all, keep my Sabbaths, the sign between me and you, generation after generation, to keep the knowledge alive that I am the Lord your God, that I am the God who makes you holy. Keep the Sabbath, it's holy to you. Whoever profanes it will certainly be put to death. Whoever works on it will be excommunicated from the people." Now I want you to notice the phrase, whoever profanes it. It's definitely a phrase we use all the time, right? It's like in common everyday language. No, of course not. Which it means treating the Sabbath like any other day in your week. He goes on to say, will certainly be put to death. So he's saying here, whoever profanes it, means treating the day like every other day, will most certainly be put to death. God was serious about this commandment. So this passage continues where it says this: "There are 6 days for work, but the 7th day is Sabbath, pure rest, holy to God. Yes, because in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he stopped and he took a long, deep breath." So let me ask you a question. When you look back over your week, amidst all the chauffeuring and the meal prep planning and the strategizing and the caring for loved ones, when was the last time you took a long, deep breath? When was the last time you intentionally set aside time to rest? God knew we needed guardrails to prevent burnout and to help us refocus our attention on him. He was serious about building our lives around the foundation of Sabbath, a day set apart as holy, a day where we rest, we worship, and we imitate our Father in heaven. Now, to fully understand God's intentions for Sabbath, we need to explore what this meant to the Israelites at the time of the Ten Commandments. So why did the Sabbath matter to Israel? Well, at this point, the Israelites are wandering in the desert, right? And they've just escaped years of slavery. So I want you to imagine the Ten Commandments as the glue that holds the nation of Israel together. God knew his children would need help on going from a country in bondage to a people, to a men and women of freedom. God knew we would need help from going from a country of bondage to men and women operating in freedom. So in the book of Deuteronomy, we see Moses reminding the Israelites of the commandments God had given them 40 years ago. This time he connects Sabbath directly to Jesus' exodus from Egypt, urging those who did not experience slavery, we're talking their kids, their grandkids, to reflect on their ancestors' captivity, on God's rescue, while also warning them against becoming an oppressive nation like Egypt. Take a look at this. Deuteronomy 5:15 says, "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." Now, this command communicated several things to the nation of Israel. Number one, it was countercultural. This command was so countercultural to the time period that it shocked the nation of Israel. The pagan cultures that surrounded the Israelites valued productivity, and they drove their people hard. Sound familiar? The very idea of taking a day off was seen as foolish and irresponsible. So I want you to imagine that you've been a slave in Egypt. Every day you're forced to do back-breaking work in the relentless sun. There is no freedom, no hope, just mindless work that never seems to end. Miraculously, you find yourself standing in the desert, hardly daring to believe that you are finally free from Pharaoh. And then you hear Moses' words that each week, as a nation, you are going to observe a day of rest. Well, what would your reaction be? Your mind would be blown. How could you even understand that the Almighty God, unlike the Egyptian slave drivers or your boss, isn't focused on extracting every last ounce of productivity out of you, but actually cares about your well-being? How generous is our God that he would invite us into the gift of Sabbath. Number two is an invitation to trust. Now the Israelites, they're living, right, as nomads in the middle of the desert for 40 years. When fear, stress, and doubt plagued them, when the urge to do something overwhelmed them, rest was God's invitation to his people to trust him. To trust that he would provide, to trust him with their very survival, to trust that while they rested, the world would keep on spinning. This was an opportunity for the Israelites to let go and surrender their need for control to God. So what about you? Do you struggle to pause, to stop? Because you're worried that if you do, your life might come crashing down? The Israelites understood. Their life, their very survival was on the line. So do we trust God with the details of our life? With our security? If not, we need to ask ourselves the question, why do we feel the need to control the details of our lives? And number three, it was an act of worship. The Sabbath was established as a holy day, separate from the ordinary week. It served as a day of celebration, of joy, during which the Israelites worshiped God, the God who had freed them from Pharaoh. This was a weekly rhythm, and it allowed them to intentionally practice rejoicing in their freedom through rest by acknowledging God's deliverance. God was giving the Israelites guardrails on how to lead and operate in Israel. He knew that for a nation to operate at its best, it needed healthy boundaries of rest. Now, that's what the nation of Israel looked like then, but I want you to work with me here. And we're going to fast forward over 1,000 years to the time of Jesus. And unfortunately, God's design for Sabbath completely fell apart. Have you noticed that as humans, we don't handle ambiguity well? Whenever God gives us a word, a vision, or a dream, we want to pin it down. We want to analyze it, reorient our lives around it, and make sure we follow it to the letter. Give us an inch of direction, and immediately we are like, we got this, God. 10 minutes later, we've taken what was a light, life-giving guardrail and turned it into a bloated law that could have come straight out of Washington. We're masters at this. We don't handle ambiguity well, and neither did the Jewish people. Now imagine this is the convoluted mess that Jesus was born into. So let's take a look at how Jesus responded to the Sabbath. So what did he do with the Sabbath? At the time of Jesus' ministry, guys, listen to this. The Jewish tradition had established 39 categories of actions prohibited on the Sabbath. 39. And heaven forbid they leave anything to chance, they also develop detailed rules for each of those 39 categories. Lauren Winter, in her book, Mudhouse Sabbath, offers us a sense of what these rules would look like, just to kind of get a taste of what we were up against. For example, if one is to avoid lighting a fire, they should also refrain from handling matches or kindling to prevent temptation. So as you can see, they didn't believe on leaving anything to chance. They wanted to lock it all down. So we see here that the Sabbath had become more about following the letter of the law than the spirit of the law. That was not God's intention for his people. God wanted his children to walk in freedom, establishing a culture of worship, rest, and mercy. So during Jesus' time, this law had morphed into a measuring stick that the Israelites do to virtue signal their own spiritual superiority. It went from being a gift of freedom from a merciful God to a strict and burdensome checklist. It reminds you of that picture we had earlier, right? It's not just the Jewish people who got it wrong. We did too. And for some of us, this strict and burdensome checklist, guys, this is what we grew up with. This is why we don't want to go back. During his ministry, Jesus reminded the Pharisees of God's original intention for the Sabbath. We see examples of this in Mark, when on the Sabbath, the disciples were seen picking heads of grain as they walked through a field. Now the Pharisees immediately confronted Jesus and asked him why they were working on the Sabbath. Jesus replied calmly, recalling a story from the Old Testament. He said this. He started telling the story about how David and his companions were hungry. They entered the temple and they ate the consecrated bread set apart for the priests. Now listen to what Jesus says here. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Jesus states outright that the Sabbath is a gift from God, meant to bring life and freedom, not burdensome rules. We see further examples of Jesus reimagining the law by healing on the Sabbath. Guys, throughout the New Testament, this happens time and time and time again, where Jesus comes in and just throws everything on its side. Look at this. In Matthew, Jesus is in the synagogue and he had just healed a man with a shriveled hand. The Pharisees immediately try to trap him by asking if it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath. Jesus calmly replies, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And in Luke, We see Jesus boldly heal a man on the Sabbath while actually eating in the house of a Pharisee. Can you imagine? I mean, seriously, sitting at that table and watching the Pharisees' reaction to Jesus. It was like one of those grab your popcorn and everything's flying right now. Jesus knew he had stirred a hornet's nest. And so he went on the offensive. He was there and he immediately asked the Pharisees whether if it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath. And suddenly, like, this huge, awkward silence just fills the air. Like, they had no response. So Jesus just calmly continues. Listen to this. If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out? We watch the Pharisees, guys, they just sit there, quietly fuming, but with nothing to say. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus challenging the Pharisees by reminding them of God's original intention for Sabbath. The Sabbath was designed to serve us, not the other way around. The Israelites had allowed man-made rules to be their master. They allowed them to dictate their actions, override their common sense, and limit their compassion and grace towards others. When we observe a day of rest, we demonstrate God's compassion, his character and compassion and love, which enables us to move through life freely and lightly. So how do we practically live out the Sabbath in our lives? Well, at VCC, we intentionally teach the kids about the church calendar because we want our children to develop a sense that their life's rhythm is not rooted in their dance and theater schedules, but in the life of Jesus. We had one parent share that when they told their 4-year-old about an upcoming birthday party, the child piped up by saying, "Oh yes, that's during ordinary time." The parent was shocked. Okay, and so they continued and they were like, "Oh yes, and you have this upcoming doctor's appointment." And the child said, "Yes, that's right before Cupcake Sunday, Pentecost, the church's birthday." We need to treat our schedules, we need to treat the Sabbath like this 4-year-old treats the church calendar. Instead of trying to cram it into an already full schedule, we are invited to plan our schedule around the Sabbath. This only works if we're intentional about creating space to practice the Sabbath. And guys, I don't know about you, but I am a master of excuses. I will sit there and I'll list a whole long of excuses. I need this to be done, this to be done, this to be done. I'll start when my schedule calms down, when my child's done with dance, or when I hit my quarterly sales goals. This doesn't work. Okay? You don't fall into practicing the Sabbath. Like any spiritual discipline, you have to contend for it every single week. It doesn't just happen to you. You have to make a plan. I want to speak directly to parents and spouses. You know who you are. Incorporating rest is about loving our people well. When we build our lives around Sabbath, we give our loved ones permission and space to rest. Let me say that again. When we build our lives around Sabbath, we give our kids, our parents, our spouses permission and space to rest. Exodus chapter 20 goes on to say that not only did God extend rest to us, but also to our children, our servants, which for us would be our employees, our animals, and our guests. God is blessing his people with sustainable rhythms of rest and instructing them on how to become a nation that shares this gift of rest with others. So last Sunday, I was driving a van full of teenagers to camp. 30 to 45 minutes down the road, if you have any experience with teenagers, you know what's coming. They were like, "I'm hungry, I'm going to die, you're starving me, I'm passing out." Yeah, you laugh because it's true. Well, after the drama had subsided, the conversation then turned to, if you could eat anywhere for lunch, where would you eat? Well, of course, after much heated discussion, friendly but heated, they agreed on Chick-fil-A. So then in the back of my van, can you imagine this? Oh, I just love those Chick-fil-A nuggets. If only I could have those warm, seasoned waffle fries. Do you know how dangerous it is to be in a van full of teenagers when they're dreaming about Chick-fil-A and it's Sunday? I still haven't recovered. But we can understand what they were feeling like, right? How many of you have been craving that warm, perfectly seasoned Chick-fil-A sandwich and then realized that they're closed? You know who you are, okay? Since the beginning, Chick-fil-A has committed to staying closed on Sundays, which makes zero business sense, guys, in our capitalist society. But Truett Cathy, the founder, wanted his employees to have a day to rest, to spend time with their family, and to worship God. And despite in a culture that equates success with 80-hour work weeks, Chick-fil-A said no. And despite being closed one day a week, they still rank among the highest volume fast food restaurants in the United States. God's invitation to observe the Sabbath isn't just for us. It's for everyone under our authority or care. Although it was considered an unwise business decision, Cathy stood firm, influencing the lives of his family, his employees, his suppliers, and his customers through this single commitment. Today, Chick-fil-A is recognized globally for its decision to remain closed on the Sabbath. Now, we don't all have the authority to give our employees a day off, do we? But another practical way to honor the Sabbath is by not texting your employees on their day off or expecting them to check their email unless it's an emergency. We all have something that we can do to honor the Sabbath. Author Lauren Winner says this: for Jews, the Sabbath shapes all the rhythms of the calendar and time. The entire week points towards Sabbath. We are invited to follow in Jesus' footsteps and reorient our lives around the Sabbath. It was designed to be a day of delight, rest, and worship. It should be our favorite day of the week, a day when you take a deep breath and entrust everything into God's tender, loving care. Now, she goes on to describe her experience of how not to celebrate the Sabbath, and I really want you to pay attention because there's a little bit of questions around this. My Sunday was more an afternoon off than a Sabbath. It was an add-on to a busy week, not the fundamental unit around which I organized my life. The Hebrew word for holy literally means set apart. In failing to make the Sabbath truly distinct from weekly time, I had violated a most basic command: to keep the Sabbath holy. There's something in the Jewish Sabbath that is absent from most Christian Sundays: a true cessation from the rhythms of work and world, a time wholly set apart, and perhaps above all, a sense that the point of Sabbath, the orientation of Sabbath, is towards God. Sabbath is not vegging out on Netflix. It is an intentional day set aside from work and striving for rest, worship, and delight. When the world is crashing all around us, when our to-do list overwhelms us, when you're moving so fast your spouse feels more like a roommate, the Sabbath is our compass. It offers us a weekly reminder to reorient our hearts. Listen to me here. Our hearts, our minds, our relationships, and our schedules towards Christ. So I want to give you a couple of good ideas that have been tested for how to celebrate the Sabbath in your own life. So I'm going to give you a list, but I want you to notice the ones that you feel most drawn to. This is not a list for all you type A people to run out and just do all of them, okay? So just don't do that. I'm inviting you to notice what the Holy Spirit is bubbling up in you. Number 1, light. Start your Sabbath with the lighting of a candle and a prayer. Kind of like what we do here. I'm blowing it out. The Holy Spirit is still here. Just want to clarify. This serves as a visual reminder that this is a sacred time set apart for God. Number 2, feast. Sounds like Lord of the Rings, right? A time where you thoughtfully prepare your favorite dishes. Listen to music and turn off your cell phone. This is when you enjoy feasting either with your friends or with your family or by yourself, intentionally thanking God for all the hands that have helped bring this food to your table. Number 3, play. Engage in activities such as board games and pickleball nourishes our souls. Another word for play is recreation, which literally means recreate. Through play, we renew ourselves by restoring our energy, sparking our creativity, and rekindling our sense of joy. Number 4, bless. Before eating, place your hand on your children's heads and pray a blessing over them. And if you're in a different season of life, you can pray blessing over your spouse or over your friends. Number 6, move. What I love about this, guys, is Eugene Peterson, pastor and author of the Message Bible, he and his wife on every Sabbath, they would go out and hike in silence for 2 to 3 hours. And they would just notice God's presence and nature surrounding them. But this was a regular Sabbath practice for them, which I love. Solitude. Incorporate solitude and silence into your day as you drink your morning coffee. Solitude and silence, it creates space to hear the still, small voice of God. Number 8, present. Give your family and friends the rare gift of being fully present. This could look like making eye contact, actively listening, and investing your time in loved ones. Guys, I have over 20 years in children's and youth ministry. Do you know this is the number 1 topic that comes up in conversation with your kids? The number 1. I just want my parents to pay attention to me. They're always on their phone. Like, we can all learn from this. This is a great practice. Number 9, surrender. Choose a period of time where you will put away your phone, silence your email, and not be responsive to technology. I want you to notice, how do you feel? And number 10, breathe. Practice releasing your stress, your responsibilities, your never-ending to-do list to God through breath prayers. One of my most favorite ones is breathe in, God is with me, and breathe out, I am safe. Super simple to do, but it's powerful. God's desire is that we establish a rhythm of rest, of Sabbath in our lives. Unlike a schedule which can feel very rigid with a lot of rules, a rhythm is an invitation from God to 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. Now you may be wondering, does it have to happen on a Sunday? I'm a nurse, I work Sundays. Okay, it does not have to happen on a Sunday. There are many traditions that celebrate Sabbath on different days of the week. So I would encourage you, find the one that you can do consistently and let that day be your Sabbath. For those of you who are overwhelmed about reorienting your life around a 24-hour period of rest, I would encourage you to start small. Do what you can, not what you can't. So let's imagine what this would look like in practice. Suppose your Sabbath falls on a Sunday. On Saturday, you and your family brainstorm to decide which of your favorite meals to enjoy. This practice should feel light and life-giving. In preparation for Sabbath, your family completes their chores. You go to the grocery store. You gather all the necessary ingredients for your Sabbath meals. And on Saturday evening, you tidy up the house and iron your clothes for the next day. You might prepare your family's favorite chocolate croissants and set out your favorite coffee or tea. When you wake up on Sunday, you give yourself extra margin. So you don't have to rush. You slowly drink your coffee, savoring the taste and smell, and you listen to your kids joyfully cram down their throats their favorite once-a-week treat. You go to church and you spend time worshiping God, and then come home to either a crock pot meal or joining together and preparing a meal. You might go for a walk or play tennis after lunch, or maybe for your family, everyone takes a nap. Sabbath will look different for everyone depending on your season of life. As a family, you're intentionally selecting the things that bring delight, honor to God, and rest to your souls. So guys, I get it. I get that this is a countercultural way to live your life. It will feel at times messy and uncomfortable. When sports schedules come out, you're going to have to contend for it. But this is an act of trust. It's an act of worship. It's an act of love. Trust that you can rest because God is in control. That through your act of worship, your relationship with Him will flourish. And it's an act of love because you're giving the people who you care about most a well-rested, joy-filled person. You're able to move through life freely and lightly. So today, I just want to invite you, if you're feeling drawn to moving through life freely and lightly, God has something for you today. So if you could stand with me